Hello and welcome to today's CPD session. This presentation will provide a guide and a reference point as we do progress through the content today. And you can find this in the handout section of the Go Control webinar control panel. And you'll also find a participant handbook in that section for you to use to record any ideas and thoughts during the session, but this isn't mandatory. So we do encourage questions, so please use the question box to share any you may have. The session is a mixture of providing information, exploring best practice, asking questions and sharing ideas. It's therefore vital that everybody participates fully, sharing their ideas in a collaborative way to allow for peer learning to take place. So if you haven't already done so, please let me know that you can hear me okay by using the question box, which you'll find in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I'm Rachel Webster, part of the provider development team. A little bit about my background. I have a teaching and assessing experience from a range of settings, including schools, colleges, and private training organisations. Teaching mainly IT qualifications and apprenticeship standards from pre-entry to level 4. I have a network computing degree and I have worked for a few years as a quality manager. I've been working on our digital T-levels since February this year. You'll now see the objectives for today's session on the screen now. The session will last approximately an hour and it is being recorded to allow all relevant colleagues to access it. We are also joined today by our subject specialist, David Seddon, who will bring in his industry and subject specialist knowledge to today's session. Hi, David. Thank you for joining us today. Just to get us started, what's your initial thoughts about today's session topic of equality and diversity and differentiation?
Yeah, hi Rachel. Hi everybody.
Hi.
As mentioned, I'm David Seddon. I'm the subject specialist for digital. Just to give a little bit of background, prior to this, I was a curriculum manager for digital programs at an FE college. I've been in education for just over 20 years, and across that time I've worked in both further higher education and also digital apprenticeships. And I was also involved with the pilot stages for the first wave of T-levels when we delivered that at the college. And I think through that, I kind of get some of the challenges we can face when we're preparing sessions that meet the needs of all students. And I think it can be especially more challenging at that early stage when we first meet the students, when we're trying to identify some of them support needs and they've not got to that point where we've identified them yet and we're still trying to plan the sessions. And also trying to identify them successful strategies that we can use and the best way to use them with particular groups. So hopefully by the end of this session, we'll look at ways in which this can be embedded into your teaching practice and looking at maybe how we can support you through some of the resources and that we've developed. Thanks, Rachel.
Brilliant. Thank you. So diversity inclusion, it does have its own section in the digital qual spec in core element 6. And I'm sure as we go through today's session, it will become relevant to this section and hopefully provide guidance to support your delivery. We're therefore going to structure the input of today's session on the basis that you're experienced practitioners. So I am going to start off by asking if everybody could respond to the first poll question. I'm just going to launch it now. So how challenging is teaching the T-level in relation to E&D needs of your students? I'll just give a few moments just to make sure I get everybody's votes in. I can see them coming in. And we have all the votes in now, and everybody has voted 100% that it's not challenging at all. So point out some important things. So I'm just going to close that vote. So in the first year of delivery from our education and childcare T level is also showing us generally that the higher level or higher achieving students are the ones choosing the T levels. So the challenges of students with E&D support needs haven't been an issue so far. However, we would like to sort of like not to think too narrowly about E&D, then we might miss identifying and supporting students appropriately. So not all D support needs are visible or made known to us. So let's try and break this down into the session today and just share some strategies and activities which would help us to meet the equality needs and promote diversity in our teaching, learning and assessment. So we're going to start off by asking for your definitions of E&D first. So I'm going to put a link to a Jamboard into the chat box. And if you can follow the link, and once you have got this Jamboard open, if you would leave it open because we'll be coming back to it as well. And so I have started us off. So I've put my first sticky note onto the question. So what is your definition of E&D? So just on the left-hand side menu, you will see a little sticky note icon, what you can use to add your definition to. I've just had a little comment in the chat box to say people are having problems accessing the Jamboard. I've just put the link again into the chat, if you can just let us know if that's okay. Do you now see the control panel? Right, I can see some posts coming through now. So what is your definition of A&D? Ruminate. So I'm now going to share a couple of definitions, and it's important to highlight that the terms do have different meanings. So the first one is from the Trades Union, the Union Congress, and it explains that equality is about equality of opportunity, that everyone should have equal access to opportunities in an education context. This would impact on our work via a review of the environment, resource production, and use and levels and types of support offered, to name a few. And for diversity, this suggests that we should value the differences between people, and we'll discuss how both of these impact on teaching and learning of the T level in today's session. The second continues the positivity about diversity, and extends this to the equality in relation to the benefits of having different perspectives, leading to better decisions. And the final quote we're sharing is from us at NCFE. Everyone here works on the premise that we demonstrate, develop and promote inclusive practice in everything we do. And this makes a more diverse, and by this I mean our staff, teams, general awareness and work practices, the better our decisions, work and ideas are going to be. David, do you have anything you would like to add here?
Yeah. I mean, I fully agree with what you said. If we can kind of demonstrate and develop and promote that inclusive practice, then it should result in a better classroom environment. And it like instills it into normal working practice. And if we think about it, that's part of the employability skills that we're embedding into the programme. So by simply paying attention to the needs of students from them diverse groups and making explicit the standards of conduct that we expect and dealing promptly and appropriate with inappropriate behaviour, for example, that's a perfect starting point. And it's trying to identify opportunities within teaching to then work collaboratively in diverse groups.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay then, we're going to start off with some general principles to take into account when teaching using an inclusive approach. But before we do share ours, we're going to go back to the Jamboard to allow everybody to share their ideas. So you'll find this activity using the same link, but it'll be on the second frame or the second slide. And just please share your ideas related to how to demonstrate and develop an inclusive teaching and learning approach. I'll just bring the Jamboard up so you can see that. Get to know the students, yeah, and don't make assumptions. Individualise and support and strategies. Excellent. Access specialised support, yeah. And make sure your resources are suitable for all the class, yeah. Yes, making sure your resources and activities are accessible. Absolutely. So making use of diverse images and presentations. Thank you so much for your input there. So as I mentioned before, we will be coming back to the Jamboard again, so please do keep it open. And while we just talk through some of ours, you can take some notes in relation to today's session in your participant handbook if you're using it. So the first of our ideas relates to treating people as individuals and not conditions. So don't generalize or stereotype students thinking you already know their needs. as each individual will have different needs. Good practice would be to avoid using an adjective as a noun to describe somebody. People shouldn't be described as dyslexic or disabled. They have dyslexia or they are a disabled person. Small things like this can make a real big difference, which leads us onto which also includes not making any assumptions and finding out from the students how their learning is impacted and what teachers and assessors need to do or adapt. You should also be aware of your own attitudes towards the needs of individuals, both positive and negative, and how they could impact on learning. So develop a positive learning environment, one in which students are confident that everything they share is used to enhance the learning experience for them. Strong and trusting working relationships with students will need to be identified and meet individual needs. Teachers should also take time to reflect, sit back and review what works for a particular student and what doesn't, and work with them to make any adaptations that may be needed. And don't be afraid to try out any new ideas and approaches. Teachers may need to explore different ways of working in order to find out which is the most effective, using the professional working relationships with students to work together and agree strategies collectively. And thinking about resources, it's important to ensure that they're appropriate for the students as individuals. They must meet the needs of the students, and remember that a resource which is perfect for one student may be an absolute opposite for another. And then finally, get support from your organisation's assistive technology and support specialist. I know the experience I've had with working with students who were deaf or blind were far more effective and positive because I've worked with my colleagues in assistive technology and learning support, and having resources converted to Braille and working with signers does really help to ensure inclusive practice. So I'm now going to ask you to tell me what your students' E&D support needs are. And to do this, please use the QR code or the link which I'm going to pop into the chat for you now. So this is going to take you to Mentimeter, just so you can add your ideas. So what support needs have your students got? I'm just going to bring over the board so you can see. So we've got partially sighted, emotional needs, yeah. Any other thoughts thinking about your students? Anxiety on the spectrum, writing using a PC, etc. Cultural needs, yeah. So that's brilliant, thank you. So now we're going to explore some strategies which could be used to enhance teaching and learning experiences for students with individual support needs. We'll explore the needs and strategies using a holistic approach, not only focusing on learning difficulties, but also bringing in other important factors and possible areas where an adapted approach might be needed, especially considering the impact or the disrupted learning and living that COVID has brought to us. However, we're not suggesting that everything we're going to see in the next few slides should be acted upon and used in your teaching and learning. The strategies we're going to run through would need to be adapted and used in direct relation to the needs of your own students. Okay, so the first one, we've got mental health of our students, especially as just previously mentioned, following the pandemic and what's going to happen next as well. Many have had 2 years or more work and mostly from home, and the impact of this on their mental health. Some colleagues have highlighted increases in mental health since the pandemic as well. David, would you like to add anything here?
Yeah, I think maybe some of the things that we could do, some of the strategies maybe students could adopt rather than things that maybe link direct to teaching practice. But, things like making sure they're taking care of the body, drinking water, healthy eating, plenty of exercise, finding activities where they can meet new people, trying to get them working more with enrichment activities, that type of things. And, encouraging that break from social media might be a good solution. If we can get them volunteering the time and energy into things like charity work or helping out with events, maybe events that we're putting on at the college, that type of thing. And, building up some of the coping skills, ways that they can deal with stress, relaxation exercises, maybe even detaching themselves from negative habits. I know we have problems with long hours of gaming and things like that, or late nights and lack of sleep. So trying to break that pattern with it. And finally, I think getting to decide what they need to achieve, set them goals, what they need to achieve academically, professionally, personally, write them down and kind of get them working towards them goals.
Absolutely, yeah. So then we've got dyslexia, a learning disability which affects skills involved in reading, spelling and writing. So symptoms could include a delay in speech, issues recalling or naming letters, numbers and colours, and misspelled words, difficulty with learning numbers and trouble learning as well.
Yeah, and I suppose then if we think of things like the impact dyslexia could have on students' ability when they're learning something like a programming language, for example, it's important not to focus too heavily on the negative aspects, and instead think about dyslexia as an alternative learning style, so to speak. It's possible that dyslexic students might be stronger at things like visualization or creativity or lateral thinking, and breaking activities down into a series of subtasks that are required to write a computer program. So you can break it down into why is it needed, define the problem, the synthesis and analysis, that whole design thinking approach, the implementation stage, the evaluation stage, and the general design and problem solving tasks involved in programming require skills that really, those are the skills that are stronger in students with dyslexia usually.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So the next section is for the blind or the partially sighted. So again, using electronic resources, how you can change the sort of colour of screens and word processors, coloured paper even. And then you've got your Braille keyboards, larger print, electronic easier to scale. And computers with speech and magnification. And then the deaf are partly hearing.
Yeah,
You
I
could,
think at that point we could look at use of caption software,
mm,
where it's possible to use it. And if you've got support in class, ask them to capture discussions on the computer. The sport worker could capture that as they're going. Or if you can find programs that will convert speech into sign language. Most mobile devices these days will convert that to text quite easily. I know some will work better than others. And modern smartphones sometimes automatically add captions to video. And I think one big one for me is don't rely on lip reading. When we're talking, it's still handy if the student can see your mouth, not turning away to write on the board. It's easy to get distracted and not think about how sometimes partially deaf students might rely on the fact that they can lip read at the same time.
yeah, absolutely. And then we have disabilities. So we always try to create an inclusive classroom where all our students are respected. And it's important to use language that prioritises the student over the disability. Disability labels can be stigmatising and also spread a false stereotype where in some cases students who are disabled feel as if they're not capable as their peers as well. So it's really important that we're more mindful of that in the class. And then we've got the autistic spectrum.
Yeah, I think with this, some of the things that we can think about to help, how many free software applications there is that might enable you to work with students better. Communication can take place via text, email, messaging. It doesn't have to be just verbal. And I think sometimes that direct social interaction can be quite challenging. Using things like email and messaging and Teams, less reliant on body language. I mean, we found when I was working at the college, when we moved across to team-based delivery due to the pandemic, the massive difference it made in participation. Computers enable learning in a more engaging and accessible way. They've got more control than we have over the classroom. So looking at the environment we're working in and how we can use computers differently with students to help them learn in different ways, making use of things like mind mapping software, where it allows students to quickly jot down ideas, and it's very visual at the same time. They don't have to worry about the structure or the order. It's just pinning down ideas as they come to it. Speech to text software, quick ways of grabbing an idea onto the page faster than typing, and it also saves problems with them spelling difficulties. And also text to speech software that lets the text and passages read out aloud. It offers that alternative to direct reading.
Absolutely. And then moving on to English. Preparing students for sort of reading questions and understanding what's required. So exploring ways to develop writing strategies, for example, writing and sentence crafting. Ask students to turn simple topic sentences into complex ones. Um, Talking students through their thought processes, it helps them to see how you can join sentences together, for example, using connectives and punctuation. Um, Write a concluding sentence that links back to their topic sentence, and then planning a few more points they'll probably may include in the paragraph before putting them together in a logical order. This can help them to start thinking in more depth and provides a logical structure. Provide criteria for them to follow, so don't write down, make them try and listen and write to help support higher level thinking. So, for example, what is digitalization? Include the following in your discussions. You could include the phrase, this highlights the key differences between digitalization and digitalization. So, consider the impact of this on the economy and society. Explain how digitalization establishes culture of innovation etc. Encourage the use of pen and paper to improve handwriting. So, for example, a little starter task, giving the students a word and ask the students to handwrite a definition, or at the end of the session, just writing 3 things that they've learned and one they would like to explore more depth. These are just examples of handwriting exercises to help build the skills to prepare your students for any written exams they may take or written tasks as part of their placements, just shorthand written exercises. And also articles to skim read and then highlight 3 key findings to help improve reading skills and prepare for proofreading. You do have apps available for phones to improve reading skills. So you've got build skills to be able to find important information in the article and know how they can skip through that. And then we've also got peer feedback. You encourage proofreading as well. And then moving on to maths.
I think
So
for
this,
maths, I mean, a lot of this is built directly into what we're teaching and what we're doing. I
yeah,
think it comes naturally into some of the topics we're teaching. Um, we can automatically include it. Short activities when we're working with binary, octet, hexadecimal, converting numbers between all three. We could work with IP addresses, subnet masks. We could look at what's the impact of miscalculations. So what happens if they get the network address wrong, and what's the impact on the network? Data analytics, that's the base of it. Looking at what it is, why it's important. I'm really getting to look at what the impact of incorrect data is, and also gives you a chance to kind of work with the different data types. Obviously, programming concepts is a good way to embed simple math skills. Performing simple calculations through problem solving scenarios and get the students to work out what the program should do before they create it. I know it seems obvious, but getting that maths working before they get into the programming element, and then they've got something to compare it about. And I
yeah,
think for me, I think one of the key things is uh, using maths to something they can relate to. One of the things we used was Mario Kart, and we had the students playing games, and we had them recording scores, recording times, speeds, calculating which team was best, finding the data from it, and again, what data was relevant that they were looking at. And they got really engaged and really working with it because it was data they could relate to. We had one student who was fantastic with maths. At least it was when it was related to the football leagues. And if we give
yeah,
him a scenario around this, his math skills was absolutely fantastic. But if we give him a different scenario, he struggled with the concepts. So it's just kind of getting them scenarios that they can relate to.
yeah, absolutely. And then just moving on to work and industry skills. So having sort of like flexible or transferable job skills as well, Dave.
Yeah, yeah, I think having them flexible and transferable skills support success in the career they're going for. Some companies will value certain skills more than others. And I think if you check on the website Indeed, what they did was they identified the top job skills that learners need to succeed in any industry. And many of these are automatically embedded into what we do with T-level delivery. And these were things like decision making, multitasking, problem solving, collaboration, communication, right through to management, leadership, team working.
Yeah,
And they're all skills we're building all the time. And students need start to as students start developing these skills early in the program. It gives them chance to um, kind of engage with what's needed for the industry experience. And I know many providers start to think quite in the early stages about how soon they can send students out. So using them first few months to start embedding these skills, start to prepare them for that placement. And if we look at it, most of these skills can be easily embedded into what we do in the classroom-based formative assessment.
absolutely. Um, so Moving on, so making sort of reference to the protective characteristics from the Equality Act, as we've already explored disability, but I haven't included it in the list here. But within these overall areas, there's a number of subdivisions, but as per all other E&D areas, it's vital to get to know your students individually and building a trusting relationship was going to allow them to share with you what their needs are and how they're best met. Um, we've also included a link to an organisation who are part of the global movement for change for lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer questioning and ACE. So people imagine in a world where all LGBTQ plus people are free to be themselves and live their life to the full. So over the past 30 years, they've helped create transformative change in the lives of people in the UK. And today they have equal rights to love, marriage, and have children. And our lives and families and relationships are representative part of the national curriculum and most of the most curriculum in the UK. So by sharing best practice that and support companies to create an inclusive workplace, have e-learning sessions for schools, colleges and children and young children, service staff, and work with educational organisations to develop inclusive practices. And their research with teachers and children and with young people has shown that 45% of lesbian, gay, bis and trans young people have experienced homophobic, biologic or transphobic or bullying. So more than 8 in 10 primary teachers have never had a specific training on how to tackle this. And 1 in 3 trans pupils are not able to be known by their preferred name at school. And 64% of trans pupils are bullied at schools for being trans. And if you would like to see more information, I've got the web address on the slide. Have a read and it'll give you more information on that. So all of the E&D factors impact on teachers' differentiation strategies. So before we go any further, we're going to briefly look and recap what we mean by differentiation. So firstly, it relates to working with groups of students. Even in small groups, the needs of the students will be very different. So we're going to focus the content of the session on working with cohorts and adapting sessions in relation to individual student differences. With this in mind, it's therefore about teachers adapting their delivery and support practice in relation to their students' needs. Having a range of activities is always good practice and links to preferred learning styles and allowing for the students to have the time and structure to learn effectively as individuals. So the biggest impact on differentiation is when the teacher considers their students' needs, which we've already started to think about in direct relation to the T-level. So considering students' skills, knowledge and levels of progress and planning to meet their development needs is very important. But so ad hoc responsive activities during a session when formative assessment gives the teacher an idea of how well the students are progressing, they can adapt their practice in real time to be responsive to this. And how to record all of this. So planning a range of support and extension activities for specific students is one way to do this, but just as important are informal annotations on lesson plans and schemes of work, and showing how learning has been adapted and differentiated in direct relation to the students' progress and learning needs. So something teachers sometimes overlook or they take for granted or the English and math skills that are needed to complete activities. GCSE grades don't always guarantee skills and knowledge. And as students have areas of strengths or gaps in their knowledge or lower levels of confidence in some of these areas. So it's worth considering them when you're planning your differentiated learning. So now we'll focus more closely on the digital support and digital business services T-level and explore what factors might impact on teachers' practice. So Firstly, the students' level of motivation and engagement. So talking to delivery staff, it's apparent that these do differ. So whilst the majority of students have extremely high levels, some are lower, and both of these will be a challenge, and teachers will need to use a range of strategies to successfully deal with them. Also, the individual personal expectations and confidence levels will need to be taken into consideration. Teachers will also have the added challenges of remote learning too, which leads us on to the support available, especially at home, evaluations of the support that can be offered to T-level students in lockdown are taking place, and remember to identify and record these. The students' IT skills and access to resources. So this is something I'm going to bring in subject specialist on, and David will be talking about this in more detail shortly. Students' English and math skills and attitude, linking back to GCSEs, tags from last year, and of course the students' attitude towards how important these are to their T-level success, which also brings us to academic literacies and the challenges that level 3 work brings. And then we've got individual levels of progress. So thinking about how aware the students are of their progress, how motivated are they to push themselves, and what their individual hooks are. And in this, I mean the type of approach teachers take to motivate and encourage them to improve. Students' ability to cope and their levels of resilience, something extremely important in the current climate. Teachers need to consider which students would need further reassurance and or support to keep them going. We've got work ethic and work experience, something really important in relation to the industry placement. Teachers should consider how strong the students' abilities and competences are in relation to being work ready, and adapt their input to highlight areas of the core content which some students need more or less support or input on here. The differences in circumstances of students in the cohort. So for example, relationships between the students in the group and who works best with who. There's also can be rapidly change with teenagers, so being mindful of these and facilitating activities which develop the students' core working abilities and managing relationships may need to be differentiated. The students' problem-solving skills and abilities will also impact on teachers' planning for differentiation. It might be that the problem-solving skills of some students need to be developed via a different teaching and learning approach. Students' awareness of their areas of strengths and weaknesses will impact on the teacher's practice. Think about the students who need to be more reflective and would benefit from improving their awareness of their levels of progress and priorities for development. The students' preferred learning styles, although we know this is an area which is contested, it's something that they should be aware of for their own learning, and also to apply learning theory to their practice in an industry context. The students' prior learning experience will have an impact on the ability to engage with the learning experience we provide for them, the human, and if they've had a negative experience in the past, they will bring that into the learning context. Any LDD and STEM requirements, although this is probably an easier area due to the formal support plans and professional input and guidance. The students' finances, there'll be a range due to different backgrounds and personal circumstances. And finally, the time of year, day, etc. for teenagers, how they manage at different times of the day, and how this impacts on their ability to focus on learning is something teachers could consider when planning for individualised learning. So we're now going to look more closely at the T-level components and make some suggestions for approaches and activities teachers could consider and use. And David and I will join together and take you through these following slides. So we've got the core. Whilst there's familiar content held within the digital T-level core, covering such a wide variety of topics, and all of these in great depth, that can be challenging for learners to prepare themselves, to answer exam-style questions, or completely employ a set project. This means that it's vital that learners get a chance to fully engage in as many activities as possible that prepare them to explain processes and procedures, explain what they've done, what they have done, how they have done it, what they could do different, what worked well, and also to reflect on that experience as well.
Yeah, I think as we know, the root core is very modular based, and this means we can deliver topics in context to set situations. Think of it a bit like building blocks. If we think within root core 1, business context introduces learners to things like the stakeholders, digitalisation, change management, meeting needs, risk, hackers, things like that. But this means that these are topics that we can explore again from a different perspective later. So when we look at the culture, we might explore things like safe use or mitigation, but then we can link that back to stakeholders and change management. So all the time, it's that reinforcing prior learning by revisiting key things. As we look at root core 3, the data part. So data, we can then consider data, how we might use it, and then again we could link that back to stakeholder engagement, looking at how data may differ, storing data, and finally getting back to the impact on stakeholders, and if what happens if the data is lost. And that means that throughout the core, the key elements are not only revisited, but they're explored in a lot more depth from different angles, and each time allows learners to explore things in more detail from that different perspective. Use the core as a bit of a mapping grid, highlight anything that overlaps, and then think about ways that they can be linked together. And then if you work between tutors that are delivering each of these elements, you can highlight how you can support each other by starting to bring these topics into the element you're delivering. And this combined approach ensures then that when students come to answer exam questions, they don't only identify, but they can also describe, they can justify, and they can clearly and articulately explain a process, the reason for the process, and how they'd implement it. So it's about that understanding and being able to articulate the impact.
Thanks. So we've got the academic level, the expectations. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, this could be quite a big step up for some T-level students. Teachers may need to consider which students need support to carry out research independently, be able to read exam questions correctly, and write an academic response to it. It might also be that there's a need to have a specific teaching and learning activities related to identifying what academic reading and writing is, how to write for different audiences and from different perspectives. So, for example, third and first person, and exploring the tone and the type of language used in academic studies. Then we've got assessments, exams, and ESP. So for many digital students and teachers, the move to these different forms of assessments might be something which needs to be factored into differentiation learning activities, revising, preparing for exams, and being able to apply the theoretical knowledge that they've gained to the project might need to be considered in different types of support, guidance, and learning activities provided for the individuals who might need help to create a revision timetable, which students might need writing frames to get them started to responding to an extended answer exam question. How could students be paired or grouped to allow for peer learning or support? Teachers could also consider which students have these skills already and need to have appropriate extension activities planned for them. Then we've got the industry placement. So students must be prepared for the placement. Experience and confidence levels will vary across the cohort. And this is nothing new, but a factor in how a student may settle and apply themselves to their placement experience. All students will be different with diverse needs and support requirements. Again, nothing new, but something that remains just as valid for students as they move through their qualification.
Yeah, and I think they're identifying placement activities that's aligned to the students' skills. So it helps to build that confidence and, improve their performance. The purpose of the placement is to build that confidence in the workplace. So students need to be in a comfortable environment where they've got the support to develop and grow. And the better the student performs, the more chance there is of building industry placement opportunities and employer engagement. If the student's comfortable and confident in the placement, this will result in better engagement, and then there's a likelihood the employers will take future placements.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got the wider skills and competencies. So for English and maths, we need to consider the skills needed to be successful on the T-level programme, as these skills are going to be vital to the success of every student and employee. Promotion of the development of them is deemed to be best practice. And some students will need more support than others. So having starter or regenerising activities planned in for all the students is good practice. But I would also suggest getting support from your subject specialist colleagues to allow you to be the most effective. And we naturally develop many industry skills throughout the programme, so problem solving, teamwork, independent study and communication are the building blocks. So by rewarding things like punctuality, like early for class, like attendance, 100% attendance, and meeting deadlines, so submitting the work on time. So we're embedding those desirable skills employers look for. And apply general competencies for English, maths and digital and context. So students will have a range of different levels of skills, which will be difficult to judge up front due to teacher assessed grades. And so this makes monitoring of such skills critical while it's on programme.
Yeah, and I think when we look at digital, not all learners are competent with IT. There's an assumption that computing students will be good at IT, but I don't think that's always the case. So we've got to be prepared for enhancing word processing skills, presentation skills, spreadsheet skills. And it doesn't tend that think about all the online resources that you'll be using in your class, or email and social networking skills. Simply being able to navigate the way through your own VLE or a student portal. And if they can't do that, they might miss important information, they might miss handing in work or activities. Think about things like your online inductions, simply connecting to your college Wi-Fi or online mandatory training modules. IT is embedded in everything we do. And in many instances, that's a vehicle that we're using for delivering the core. So it's just preparing students for that.
And then communication, so opportunities to apply communication and indeed wider core skills are embedded throughout the core and identified in the scheme of work. Students should be encouraged to use active listening, to speak and to communicate effectively in all activities and experiences. Employability and progression, it might be useful for some students to be supported to reflect on their skills and explore the softer skills and competencies they need to develop or improve. Which also leads us on to reflection and awareness of development needs. And although reflective practice is at the core of the industry and something we've already talked about, it's probably going to be an important factor to consider when planning differentiation activities.
Yeah, and I think we've got to consider student experience or maybe the lack of experience they've had due to the pandemic. They might not be as prepared for education as previous students were. They might have different expectations and even different goals now. And also, when preparing students for placement activities and experience, can it be supported through practice or simulations in the classroom? The preparation for this placement will also support the development of practical, technical, and core-based skills.
Yeah, thank you, David. So just moving on, briefly, if we could just sort of run through, David, if I hand over to you, if you can just sort of skip through quite sort of briefly what resources we sort of currently do have and where they can be accessed from.
Yeah, no problem. I know we're getting really short on time, so I'll go through these really quickly. If anybody
Yeah.
does have any questions about these after, you can always drop me an email and I'll always get in touch about them. Just take through to support the core delivery of the T levels. We've developed both essential and additional resources, which are directly aligned to the technical quals. We've focused a resource development based on feedback from providers we've done through surveys and the areas that they identified as being challenging to teach. All the essential resources are free resources, and you can use these, and they're aligned to the core elements. And these include things like interactive e-learning resources, a session plan, which accompanies the resource, and then interactive activity sheets that you can use alongside, and they also build into further home study tasks as well. The additional resources we developed are paid resources that include additional e-learning activities, and they also include things like a tutor delivery guide and activity sheets. And they've been developed in such a way that you can then embed that into your own teaching practice. You can take the worksheets and bring them into your own session plans, lesson plans, and use them the way you want to use them. So these resources typically include classroom-based activities, interactive PDFs, which means students can be sent away, they can download it, they can save them, they can type into them. Fantastic way for them to keep coming back to work and keep updating it. And if you don't want to do that, you can always print them out and have them use it that way. There's independent learning and extension tasks and reflection activities in there. There's the e-learning modules themselves. And then we've developed session plans, which you don't have to follow, but they're a guide of how you can use the resources. And they've all been developed so that you can host them on your own learner management system, such as Moodle or Blackboard, or on your own VLE. And they can be potentially hosted through things like Teams or SharePoint, if that's what your college uses. The scheme of work for the digital core and the route pathway has been released, and that's also available for download from Qual Hub, and they're all there under teaching materials, and they're designed to support providers in planning and development of the curriculum. Not mandatory that you use them, but they're there for you to support with your own scheme of work development. Qual Hub itself is our online qualification portal. I'm sure many of you will have seen it, and that's where you can find all the NCFE accredited qualifications. All the learning resources are there, all the delivery support's there. You can type in for the T level you're delivering, and you'll find just the resources that are relevant to that. And all the approved centres have access to Qual Hub, and you can, if anybody is having a problem, you can contact our learning resource team, and the email address for that's on the last slide. All e-learning sessions and modules have been developed using accessibility features that's available within the software we use. So this means that there's options in the resources for you to adjust the background screen colour, which can be seen on screen. There's the ability to navigate through the sessions using just keyboard if you can't use mouse. There's voice assist technology in there, and we've also used screen enhancements. So, for example, the screen we've got on there at the moment, you'll see the text only covers 2/3 of the screen. That's when a screen enhancer is used, the text will still fit on a normal screen size without any need for scrolling. And screen readers and voice assist are also part of that accessibility part. And the software used to develop these sessions is compatible with most common voice recognition software and screen readers that's available currently. The one that's on screen at the moment is an example that shows how users can navigate just using keyboard strokes, and they can use the tab feature to highlight the area they want and then enter to execute it. User can use the arrow keys to navigate round, and other assistive controls in there like Control Alt and comma to go back a slide, or Control Alt full stop to move to the next slide. The one we've got on screen there is for root core element 1, which is business context. And this one focuses on consideration values and meeting customers and end user needs. This module is part of the additional resources that's been currently released, and it looks mainly at the importance of web accessibility and compliance. And within there, it also refers to the guidelines, WCAG, the policies, regulatory requirements, which covers accessibility of websites. So again, for what we've talked about today in differentiation and that and accessibility, this is an ideal one for where you're working with students. All sessions and modules have clearly defined differentiated learning outcomes. And as you can see from the example on the screen, they're split into what you must be able to do. Some of you will be able to do this, and some of you might aim to do this. There's a range of extension activities, either on the screen or within the downloadable activities. And as I said, there's home study tasks in every activity. So there's always something there for differentiation for students. Alternatively, you could use these extension activities and you could use them to be adapted to classroom activities. So everybody's included. How you adapt them resources to use for your teaching practice is up to you as you're working with them. And as part of the essential resources, as part of the extension resources, it builds onto the additional tasks for research and allows students to build on prior learning or independent study. As I've mentioned previously, all the resources include activity sheets, and you can see an example of one on the screen. And these are usually interactive PDFs that accompany the e-learning resource materials, and they allow students to then gather their own notes, work on group-based tasks, participate in scenarios, research topics. They help to embed, extend and consolidate learning, and they can be used alongside the e-learning resource, or they can be used independently to complement your own delivery, and you can just take these and build them into your own schemes of work.
That's lovely. Thank you, David. That's lovely. Thank you, David.
Right, thanks. If we've lost the voice at the moment, just coming up on screen,
all right.
it's just about.
Am I back now, am I?
Yeah, it's back on now.
Back now. Sorry about that. So just to run through the content support, so they can do demonstrations, they can show you how to use resources. They do work very closely with the provider support team on how to support and adapt your resources. And they do have a dedicated mailbox which will give you a response within 24 hours, and that's Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. And they have regular contact with account managers regarding T-level updates, and they will keep you informed of those. And their email address is on the slide now. So questions for consideration. So understanding your students' needs by observing formally or informally to determine the current knowledge, skills and behaviours. Then recording and reviewing these to check to see if your students are meeting them. Do your students know what their support needs are? And can they identify if their needs are being met? Are your students being stretched and challenged enough? How effective are your support extension activities? How do they improve engagement and learning with your students? And what assumptions, if any, do you make about your students? So just a little thing, if you've got the participant handbook, it can leave some thoughts in there for you to refer back to. So this takes us nicely to our question slides. So just if you have got any questions, you can add to them, but I would just like you to go back to your Jamboard, and if you could just put down some key takeaways for today's session, that would be great, please. Please let us know what you've heard, what you've learned or thought about today, just to evaluate your own practice moving forward. So you will be on slide 3 of the Jamboard, and just your key takeaways. Need to talk to maths and English colleagues. Absolutely. It's so important, and they're the best people to go to. Work with other teachers to look at mapping. Brilliant. Yep. And just while you're recording your takeaways, I am going to launch our final poll. So if you can please let us know your how the sessions really impacted, really, or has it improved your skills, knowledge, and confidence, or has it provided reassurance that what you're already doing is best practice and will meet the needs of the T-level qualification? That would be great. I'm just going to launch the poll now. So after attending the session, how has your knowledge or understanding or confidence of quality and diversity changed? And I've got all the votes in now, and we have everybody moderately improved. So that's really good to know. Thank you very much. And I would just like to say thank you. We've reached the end of the session. I know we've overrun a little bit, but thank you for attending and participating in today's session. Please could you complete our evaluation form as you log out, because we really do rely on your feedback and ideas to inform and improve our CPD activities. And I would just like to say take care, goodbye, and we do look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.